Karson, Karol.
Hey.
Welcome back, actually.
Yeah, been a while.
You are one of the few people who will know this, but this is actually the second iteration of this self-produced, kind of self-directed and mostly self-indulgent creative journey / podcast. And you were actually the first person that I sat down with years ago.
Yep.
And said, hey, I kind of have an itch for maybe doing something like this. Mm-hmm. I really love this style of conversation. I really love this kind of interaction, what it is conducive for. You know, I like to go deep and I like to get into the feelings of things. And I happen to have the resources and the skill set and the interest to make it happen on my own. And so I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And you're like, yeah, you should do it. And in fact, you're like, we should do it.
Yeah.
And then you came to Austin for a little bit. We did a kind of a pilot episode to just like see what the chemistry was. We loved it, but then you refused to move to Austin
for a while. I'm here now.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm done waiting for you. And so I did it on my own. And so I did a version of that for a little bit last year and enjoyed it, but it came to a pause, and now we are in round 2. So
take
welcome.
2.
Yeah.
And you're calling it what now, right?
Oh, Karson, there's a name for it now, and it's not that, but you know, good option. Welcome to the Wait What podcast. Yeah. And yes, I really do want everyone to say it just like that when they say it.
Wait, what?
Yes, there you go.
Like
Wait,
that?
what? Yeah. So this is a new endeavor for me. To answer the question you didn't ask, why round 2? Why a different version? Why reset and restart? And the reason is that while I really enjoyed, and I think I had a lot of great conversations, and I think it was a blessing to the people I was able to sit down and talk with on the kind of the first version of this, I was really trying to build an identity that was for me.
Yeah.
Where I was trying to showcase this emotionally deep intellectual thinker that had this desire to be impressive to people through his wisdom.
Sure.
And I started to have some pretty serious convictions about the fact that I wasn't pointing to the source of my identity, which is Jesus.
Yeah, that can be easy to do because, like, I mean, I did social media for a little while. I was in the fitness space, which is the most vain,
right? You
know, or it can be, and I totally understand. I think we did one here at your house during that. We talked about fitness and all that stuff. And we've done stuff together, collaborated on stuff, and so it's easy to get in that like creative, social media, like everything's for show mindset. And so I think it's cool that you kind of like reoriented and be like, okay, hold on. Jesus, right? Jesus at the center of everything. And so let's make it about that.
Yeah. I just found myself in conversations with people thinking about how I could bring up faith and thinking about how I could kind of mention what I believe or maybe what the Bible says about something. And there was just like oh no, because it's a mood killer for so many people.
Yeah.
And I know it's one thing to kind of live life and say, oh, I'm a Christian. And that's pretty accepted because it's become so different for so many people. And it's not the same as saying like, I'm a Bible believing, church going disciple of Jesus.
Right.
Because that kind of committing yourself to that comes with a number of cultural assumptions about who you are, what you're like, how you treat people, and what you believe. And in some ways that's correct because you can go read the Bible and you can see what I believe. And some of those things are hard things to wrestle with. And I realized that I was scared of what that might mean for me, where I might lose influence. I might lose the ability to be taken seriously. And what I wanted was to be taken seriously as a smart, intellectual, emotional, mature guy. And so this is kind of the antithesis of that, which is I need to give credit to the one who has made me who I am, right? All the good things about me are because of Jesus. Yeah. And And it's only in me doing those things that he is able to be seen, right? Like he is made known through my weaknesses. And so my strengths are not a reflection of me, but actually him working through me. Like those are the things that I wasn't doing well and I wasn't attributing to him. And I need to. And not that I really care about having these necessarily spiritual conversations or even conversations about faith, but it's just like I need to point back to Jesus and I need to not be scared about it. And so that was kind of the fundamental reason of like why I need to reset.
Right.
Why, wait, what? As the name of a podcast. So honestly, like for 6 months, I just had this in the back of my mind. Like I thought about it one time. I was like, oh, that would be an awesome name for a podcast. It's like clever. It's, whatever. I have since been told by a number of people it's not a great name for a podcast, and that I'm trying to be too trendy and whatever. Yeah. And I receive that, and I get it, and that's okay.
And you rejected it,
and
and here we are.
I'm committing to it. Well, as you know, I like to have layers to things.
Yeah.
And so while I like the name of it, I didn't want it to just be purely for the name. But as I started thinking about like, what would I want this to look like? Like I have a heart for doing this. I need it to make sense. I need it to be on purpose. I need it to not be vain. Like, what do I want to do? And I kind of, through some reflection, realized my favorite thing to talk to people about is the moments in their life where they experienced transformation. Yeah. Where they were going in a direction, they had a frame of reference or a worldview, and then they were presented with something that made them stop and go, wait, what? Right? Where something was different than what they were used to.
Yeah.
And it made them consider something else. And for some, sometimes it's, oh, that's better. Let me go that way. Right. Or it's, oh, that's hard. Let me think about it and realize, no, after I've kind of doubled down on what I believe or how I operate, not going to be for me. But either way, it's foundational for people. And I like learning about those things about people. And I also think whether you're a spiritual person or a person of faith, we all have kind of these existential feelings. And so those moments for me are really interesting. And then they can also be both really serious and deep and meaningful. And they can also be ridiculous and really silly. Like, for example, a couple years ago, someone tried to convince me that all of the Skittles were the exact same flavor and that it was just my brain that was telling me, well, because it's red, it tastes like whatever I thought red was. And I just rejected that because it cannot be true. There's no way that's true. And so I did what most of us did, which was the blind taste test. And I'm batting 1,000 in that. So
really, you get every single flavor every single time.
Okay, so like 90% probably. Okay. But like enough to be like, I know.
Which favorite flavor?
I think red if I'm just eating one, but yellow or green if I'm eating more because it's not as strong of a flavor. And so I don't know.
That's yellow, green, lemon, lime.
Yeah, and also lemon, lime, not green apple. But that's another conversation. So anyway, welcome to the Wait What podcast. Really, this is going to be a journey about hearing about people's wait what moments, like what has happened in your life. What are things that have kind of transformed you, made you who you are, or ridiculous things. And so that's kind of the setup. Hopefully, I won't be always talking this much at the beginning of episodes, but I would love to hear like, what do you think about that? One, why are you here? Like, why? Yeah. What made you say yes to this, and thoughts about all of that?
For sure. One, I love Jesus, and being able to share my story and testimony in any way possible. That's always I think something God's called us to do, which is awesome. Two, we're great friends. We've been friends for
over 10 years. Yeah,
probably like closer to 15. Like honestly, so it's been cool being a part of and being along for the ride in kind of a like tangential way of like seeing you go through different things. Cause like I said earlier, we've done social media stuff together. We've done podcasts together. And I think, like you said, there's this temptation to overproduce, especially for creatives and for myself on my side, speaking for myself, like I'm a perfectionist, like I'm a 1 Enneagram. I want everything to be perfect. And it's easy to just try to overproduce and manufacture something rather than just having a conversation and just letting it be about Jesus. And if it goes somewhere, great. If it doesn't, somebody got something out of it. I did, you did.
Yeah.
Even if it's just us two and nobody ever listens to this podcast. But what I thought about that, what I thought about the wait, what? You know,
Nice.
I'm going to try to say it different every time.
Yeah.
I think that's
important.
I think that's what we're going to do. But when you kind of pitched that to me, I was like, that's a really cool idea of just to really get down to the heart of somebody's story or something that's happened in your life. And like you said, sometimes it's like a quick flip of the switch moment where you're just like, slam on the brakes, what the heck's going on in my life? And then sometimes it's years in the making, and it slowly matures and slowly transitions, you know, into a different way of thinking or a different way of living. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a slam on the brakes, sit back, process, and say, am I the way I'm living my life or the things that I'm doing, is that honoring to the Lord? Is that the way I want to live my life? Is it who I am? And sometimes you come to the conclusion, yes, right? But it just you slam on the brakes and like take a second to kind of look around and figure out what you're going through, because I'm guilty of it, and I'm sure many people are, just going 1,000 miles an hour and not stopping to think every once in a while, and doing that I think is important. So. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good direction, you know, and I'm excited to hear like all the other people you have on, and all that stuff. And
well, it's really going to be, you know, I think that this initial kind of launch will be me connecting with people who are kind of heroes of the faith for me, like people who have been foundational in my spiritual upbringing.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who I need to reconnect with, because they've set me up for success. They've kind of pointed me towards Jesus in different ways, both practically and spiritually and emotionally and relationally. And so, you know, one of the things that I wrestled with as I thought through what to do about this was, Dave, if all you care about is just talking to people and listening to their stories and getting that wisdom,
why not just have lunch? Or coffee or whatever.
Why does it need to have cameras and mics? Aren't you just feeding into the vanity that you say you're trying to avoid? And that's a really fair and honest question, and a fair criticism. And it has been one of the reasons why I've kind of waited for quite a bit of time to really pull the trigger and do this. The answer is, for me, is that I believe that the people I'm going to sit down and talk with have an abundance of wisdom and truth that is going to be helpful for more than just me.
Yeah.
And I believe that if I have the tools and resources to make it available to others, then I should. And that if I am in a conversation with someone where they're just kind of spilling and overflowing the wisdom that God's given them from their experience and from their learning and their life, and that's I'm able to give that to others, you know, indefinitely, then I should do that.
Yeah.
And trust and submit myself to Jesus and say, hey, don't let this be about me. And even though I'm going to want to make it about me, don't let this be about me. Please let me just focus on the wisdom and truth that will come from these conversations. And a lot of the people that I think I'll sit down with are people that wouldn't otherwise be on social media. I mean, there are going to be a lot of parents, like people who were parents to me in different ways growing up, like not necessarily pastors or people who are on stage or people who you would hear from. And so that's why, and hopefully this will keep me accountable to them and to that, to be a good steward of this space. And then the other thing is, you know, once you put out into the world, hey, I'm a Bible believing, like, church going Christian. Like the God of I believe the God of the Bible is the one true living God, and Jesus is the Son of God who died on the cross because I have sin that I can't pay for, and he loves me so much that he did it for me on my behalf. Like, if I'm going to profess that publicly, the stakes are then much higher for me to live my life in accordance with that. And I need that because it's so easy to operate as a good, quote unquote, good person with these core moral values that actually all come from Scripture, and avoid all of the hard parts about the Bible that people are going to struggle with or question you about or whatever. And so you can kind of have it both ways, where you can claim to be a good person and, you know, operate where everyone likes you and they think really highly of you, and then in your one-on-one conversations, talk about Jesus and manage it so that you don't have the struggles that come with you don't have the baggage that comes with being a believer, but then you also get the like spiritual like celebration from within your church community. And like the Bible makes it really clear, like Jesus says, they're going to persecute you for me.
Right.
And, you know, the Bible says, consider it joy when you face trials of suffering because it produces perseverance in you. Like you can't have it both ways, right? Yeah. You can't serve God and money, right? You can't have two idols where it's like, I want to worship God, but I also want my comfort. I also want success in my business, even if it means keeping my beliefs to myself in certain ways, right? Yeah. And so this will hopefully be a service to those by who I talk to. Yeah. And then a way of staying accountable to me living in accordance with who Jesus calls me to be by saying, hey, Dave, if you have a bunch of clips of you talking about how you believe that this is the way to live life, then when you're one-on-one with someone in a relationship where you have the temptation to not honor them or to not honor Jesus or to be selfish, the stakes are higher. Right. And you better not act as the hypocrite that, you know, Jesus calls out the Pharisees to be, right? Where they know the truth and they yet don't live by it. So hopefully that will be good for you.
Yeah. And the thing about it and what all of the stuff you're explaining, like it rings such a bell with me because you're basically putting yourself in a fishbowl, right? And you're opening up the windows of your life. And because anything you put on the internet, it's there forever, right? You know, we've been taught that and it's true, you know? And so you've all of a sudden set a standard that the whole world knows and that you can't go back from, you know, without some extreme, you know, shame or like difficulty, I would say more so than anything. Yeah. And that's a critical, like that's a hard thing to do. And I think that, you know, when you look at baptisms in the Bible, that's what baptisms were. Baptisms were a public profession of faith that in a world where if you were baptized, there were people there from the government writing your name down and keeping an eye on you. Right. We don't have that because we live in America and it's this amazing, you know, experience to have freedom of religion. But I think we've lost some of that. But I think you're kind of reintroducing that into your life with saying, okay, podcasts, right? And to speak on that, I think that for maybe I'm speaking for you, I see podcasts as like just you're such a creative person, right? And you love production and all that stuff. Like I just see this as an outlet for you to honor the Lord with, but do something that you love, you know, because when we think about ministry, I think a lot of times as Christians, we think, oh, I have to go on this mission trip. I have to go and feed the homeless. I have to do these, this is the list of ministry things that I have to do. And everything else I do in my life that's not ministry. Yeah. Which that's not what the Bible says. That's not how we're meant to live our lives. And so I see that as a beautiful, like blending of, hey, let's be able to do the thing that Dave loves and be able to honor the Lord with it. So I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, dude, that's honestly like this isn't my necessarily like, wait, what moment, but like one of the things I've learned that has been taught to me is that acting in ministry and being a disciple for the kingdom is not about just doing Jesus Bible church stuff. Right. Like one of the things that constantly blew me away in my campus ministry was the guys that were leading were like, hey, do you want to hang out? I'd be like, yeah, okay, you're my small group leader. Like we're going to like sit down and we're going to like go through the Bible. We're going to go through the curriculum. He'd be like, great, let's go. And like he'd show up and he'd pick me up from my apartment and we'd go to Walmart, we'd do groceries, we'd talk about school, he'd drop me off, and
that was it.
Not once did Jesus come up. And I was like, wait, what? Like we can do that? Like you can just spend time with Jesus in a way that is like, you know, just with friends. And one of the biggest things that I think I learned in college was learning that like Jesus is in community, and being in community is a part of like loving the Lord, and like that he's there, and he's not just there when you talk about him. He's there when you are just being together. And that's incredible. And so, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I do think I'm hopeful that will be the case, which is just by being involved in this and committing to it and showing up for conversations, that God will work. And I love it. Yeah, I love doing this stuff. And so hopefully it'll be really fruitful. So I guess like my question for you officially is like, do you have a kind of a wait, what moment in your life where you have been going in one direction and someone was like, hey, what about this? And you were like, wait, what?
Yeah. So this is going to sound like totally, I don't want to say anti-Christian, but like the opposite of what you would believe like the normal Christian progression would go in.
Yeah.
You know, most people start out as, you know, normal person, sinner, whatever. They meet Jesus and it's like, oh my gosh. And they start living their life a little differently. And then maybe one day if they have some sort of calling on their life, or if they're really, really spiritual, then they become a pastor. Right. And so, but for me, all those things are true, maybe not the really, really spiritual part, but I, from a young age, basically from the time I graduated college, literally 2 days after I graduated college, I started ministry and I started working as a pastor in Houston, and I did that for 9.5 years. I loved it. It was a fantastic job. It, you know, to kind of reiterate your point, like you have to live your life to a standard. You live differently when you're a pastor, because everywhere I went, I was in the back of my mind, like somebody would recognize me. I worked at a very big church. I was on stage. I didn't know the 4,000 people in the congregation, you know, or in the seats in the auditorium that day. I knew some of them, but I knew that, and several times like I'd be out at the grocery store or doing this or doing that, and someone would come up to me, hey, Pastor Karson, and I'd be like, what's up, man? You know, and because you live your life in a fishbowl. And so my kind of wait, what moment was when I started to kind of at the kind of tail end of my ministry, pastoral ministry, transition out of that and say, okay, what does normal life look like? Because again, I went to college and I went straight into being a pastor and ministry. So I never had the normal 9-to-5 corporate or even just job where you're just working to make money and that's it. You know, Jesus isn't necessarily a part of it. For people who can make Jesus a part of work is amazing. And that's something that I'm learning to do and having to kind of restart and relearn. But yeah, and so to kind of speak to, okay, what was that moment? Again, I don't think it was a slam on the brakes, you know, stop everything and transition out of ministry. I think it was a slow burn of over a couple of years, a couple of factors, right? One is, I started having a desire to go outside of pastoral ministry, of church, right? Vocational, we call it vocational ministry. And I started having that desire, and I started, you know, thinking about and you know, just spending more of my thought life on what would it look like if I wasn't a pastor. And a lot of that transitioned. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, I was in the fitness industry for a while. I did social media. I did online coaching. I did all kinds of stuff. And so a lot of my life is geared around fitness. And that was true even when I was a pastor. A lot of my, you know, even work time was going to the gym and talking to people and inviting them to church, inviting them to Bible study and doing that stuff. And that was my, kind of similar to you, that was my ministry outlet in something that I loved. And I think that's a really cool way to just live your life of saying, okay, what do I love and how can I invite Jesus into this? Because small wait what moment that I'm thinking about is that I remember like I've been, you know, I worked out since high school, like all through college, like always fitness, lifting weights was always part of my identity. And I remember like I was maybe 2 or 3 years into ministry where I was going to the gym and I was just like, this just isn't doing it for me. Like I'm just bored. I don't want to go. Like my passion isn't there. And so I prayed about it and I was asking the Lord, like, okay, what, like, is this something I just give up? Like there's some disconcern in my heart. What is this about? And I remember hearing clearly from the Lord is like, well, I'm not a part of it, you know? And that was an aha moment for me of saying, okay, so how do I invite the Lord into my gym time? Because gym time, you know, in concept or in reality is very selfish.
Yeah.
Right. You go in and think about if you go to the gym or if you work out, even if you just work out at home, you put headphones in, put some music on, and you go and you do sets and reps and work out and sweat and all that stuff. And I realized that there were times where I was going into the gym, maybe saying hi to the person at the front desk, saying, "Hey, how's your day?" And then walking past, right? Doing my workout and then leaving and not ever talking to anybody. And so I started to explore the idea, okay, what would it look like for the Lord to be involved in this? So what I started doing was just going into the gym and just while I'm there, just praying, "Hey, Lord, is there anybody you want me to talk to today?"
That's good.
Of just saying, "Hey, that guy over there, or, this person, they look like they need some help, or this person looks like they're struggling," and stuff like that. And it's led to some amazing conversations in the gym.
Yeah.
And it led to some amazing friendships, some opportunities to pray for people, like just all kinds of, and again, like I said, just invitations to church, invitations to Bible study, and really doing ministry outside of a vocational standard. And so that was my smaller wait, what moment.
Yeah.
But kind of that leans towards, okay, when I was saying, hey, what does it look like to transition out of ministry and do something different other than vocational ministry? I started thinking about, okay, I love the gym. Like I love fitness. Like how can I give that to other people? And so the idea that was planted in my head was owning a gym. And so I started thinking about it. I started doing research on it. And then just had a conversation at the gym I was going to at the time. I'd known the owner a little bit. I just mentioned to him kind of casually, like, "Hey, like, I don't know, I've always thought it would be cool to own a gym, whatever." And so we kind of started chit chatting and stuff like that. And then kind of had several conversations over a couple months and whatever. And basically got to the point where he was like, "Hey, if you're willing, like, why don't you just come work for me and I'll kind of teach you everything I know about owning, running, operating a gym." Because he's a small business owner, like one of one gym in Houston. It's not like a big mega corporation gym or a franchise or anything like that. And so I was like, okay. And so that was like one of the factors. And, financially it didn't make any sense. Like I wasn't making a crazy amount of money as a pastor, obviously, but I was literally going from pastor salary to, okay, I'm going to make $14 an hour working the front desk while I learn how to do this. Right. Yeah. And so that was one of the aspects. And then kind of on top of that, again, as I was thinking about doing this other thing, I started running into roadblocks at the church in terms of being able to progress and grow as a pastor. I never wanted, I was never a public speaker. I taught occasionally, usually about once a month with our junior high kids, which is where I was mainly. I spent 4 years as a junior high pastor. Then I started training other pastors to be pastors. So I took a group of interns and trained them to be pastors, which was amazing. So I never was like a public speaker. So I never wanted to be the guy on stage and be the pastor of a church. But I did want to be able to run a ministry, run a church, maybe like as an executive pastor role, or we had campuses. So my thought was campus pastor, right? I want to be a campus pastor. So I remember having conversations with my boss at the time, who was over campuses. He was in charge of the campuses and maintaining and making sure we're all kind of on the same page and everybody has resources and all those things. And so he said, okay, let's start that process. So started that process. It was February 2020. We all know what would happen in a month. I transitioned to this new role of, I was associate campus pastor at our Tomball location. So I was under the head campus pastor, kind of be trained, but then I was training those interns to be student pastors, junior high, even kids pastors. So, and so I took that job. I took that role in the church, and then literally 2-3 weeks later, world shuts down, COVID. We all know, we all experienced it. And so ministry was very different. Everything was crazy. That campus was meeting in a theater, like a movie theater. So, and of course movie theaters were definitely off limits. Right. And so we didn't have a place to meet. We were just kind of doing COVID and doing ministry. We were doing a bunch of different community outlets and stuff like that. World kind of comes back online. We get back in the campus in the movie theater. We do ministry there for, I was probably like 5 or 6 months. And then the church as a whole decides that we didn't want to renew our lease at that campus. And so we're going to kind of roll that back into the main campus, which was only about 30 minutes away. So one of the things that we experienced was a lot of our Tomball members were just driving right past us to go to the main campus. We've got bigger stage, better lights, better music, like all the fun stuff. And so they shut the campus down. They rolled me back into being a life groups pastor, a community groups pastor, Bible study pastor, whatever. So I was managing groups, and I just didn't really love that. And then I was starting to have conversations with my boss, who's the campus, overall the campus and stuff like that. And it just, from the conversations I was having with him, it didn't seem like we were starting any new campuses anytime soon. And so that was a real like, okay, so what is my next step as a pastor? Because I'm not really satisfied with exactly what I'm doing now. It doesn't look like there's anything for me in the future. Meanwhile, this desire to start a gym and all of these things start coming up. And so that's when when the gym owner asked me, hey, come work for me for $14 an hour and sit at a desk part-time. I was like, all right, let's go, Wow. And so that was my like, okay, hold on, stop, think, like, what does it look like to not be a pastor anymore? And so I transitioned out 2022, I believe, it was right after Easter. I got through Easter, the Easter craziness. I think we had like 12 services or something ridiculous like that. And then a week goes by and I have to sit down, get my 2 weeks, all that stuff, start working for this gym. And yeah, so spiritually, that was a totally different animal than anything I was used to, because again, okay, now I have a actual job, quote unquote actual job, not a vocational ministry job. Okay, how do I have to live my life? What are the freedoms that I have now? Right? Because, I work for a church. We were non-denominational, but very closely tied to Baptist. Like, one of our rules is pastors don't drink. I grew up in college drinking, all that stuff, like, was healthy with that, but I enjoyed, having less alcohol. I think it's allowed. And so, but under the honor of that leadership, I was like, okay, I'm not going to drink. Yeah. So one of the examples. So, but like we said, you live your life in a fishbowl as a pastor. And now all of a sudden I'm out of the fishbowl and I'm in my little, it can be a dark box of, I get to live my life how I want to live it. I have the freedom to do whatever I want. I'm a normal person now. What now? Yeah. And that was and is still something that I'm learning to do, of transitioning into that lifestyle. Now it's been 3 years. Now I'm not doing the gym. I'm working for a construction company. Still want to do the gym, but kind of on the back burner. I figured out it's going to probably cost $1 million to start for kind of what I want. So financial, like I tried doing aid and doing different stuff. It didn't work out. But at the company I'm working now, it's like, okay, how do I bring the Lord into my time? How do I go to church? How do I just be an attender and someone who is a part of Bible studies and not leading the Bible study? And how does all that work? And I don't know if I have the answer to that. I think I'm getting a fresh perspective on what the people who I was ministering to were going through on a daily, weekly basis. Yeah. Because what I found is it's very, very easy. I'm like starting to come out of a busy season where I've literally traveled for work since Thanksgiving up until this last week was the first week I have not traveled for work.
I've been missing you Sunday mornings.
I know.
You're never there.
And like this last week I went to Bible study for the first time since Thanksgiving. Like it was good to like kind of reset, but like in the busyness of life, like how do I bring the Lord into that? And there's definitely been times where I'm just like, I'm failing as a Christian. Like I just do not feel connected to the Lord spiritually. I'm not making wise decisions even sometimes. Yeah. I'm not thinking about Jesus, talking about Jesus, any of that stuff. That was a daily aspect of my life for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's really hard for people, I think, to understand, I when I invite people to church, a lot of times they say, well, first they ask me why. Like, why are you inviting me to church? And my answer is because that's where Jesus is, and that's we're supposed to be. And you know, the feedback is often, well, like, I know where Jesus is. Like, I pray to him in my free time, and like we're good. And that's good, and that's true. But and I don't want to kind of, you know, trivialize what people say about their faith because it's between them and the Lord. But what I do know is that isolation with Jesus is not good enough.
Right.
Because what Jesus says is don't be in isolation.
Right.
So it's not that Jesus isn't enough for you in isolation. He is enough, period. End of story. But what he has to say explicitly is don't be in isolation.
Be in community.
Be in community. Show up. And it's like, anything you tell me that you're good at, the reason you're good at it is because you have disciplined yourself to do it. And yet we look at things like church, small groups, reading our Bible, or just hanging out with people one-on-one as like, well, those are just like good things to do, but not necessary in the way that showing up to work every day is necessary, or eating food is necessary. And my kind of message, and I think one of the things that I've really been passionate about, or that at least God's put on my heart recently, is like, you need to treat church and small groups and reading the Bible as seriously
as possible
as showing up to work to get paid to live your life. And if you think that if you think that message is judgmental, or it is not empathetic to your life, then I would just challenge you to read this a little bit more. Because this is, I also don't want to go to church on Sundays most weeks.
Right.
I also don't want to drive 45 minutes to go to small group and then drive and be gone for 4 hours. Like, there are things I don't want to do, but I have learned that through consistency in doing those things that are not immediate gratification, like showing up to work is, or working out is, or whatever else you might think is important, the immediate gratification doesn't always come. It's delayed in God working in your life through consistency in community. And, you know, as we kind of wrap up, I think for me, a wait, what moment has been kind of like you, not an immediate thing. But someone said it to me. Someone said it in like a sermon or something, and I've stuck with it. But it's the idea that understanding is actually downstream of obedience. People really want to first be like, well, let me get it. And once I get it, then I'll know why I need to do it. So then I'll do it.
Right.
And it's really clear in scripture and in life that you're not going to get it until you do it.
Right.
When you're raising children, you don't wait for them to understand why the rules are the way they are before you expect them to obey. You say, I am your parent, and I'm not a parent. So like, I don't know anything that I'm talking about, but like what people have taught me is like, you have to make sure your children obey first, know the rule, listen, and be obedient. And then later as they grow up, they will see how, oh, that's why. And that's the same thing about Jesus. Is you're not going to get why it matters so much. You just won't get it until you take a step of faith and do it even when you don't understand.
Yeah.
And then you will understand over time. And like the goal of reading scripture is relationship. It's not understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me has been something that's really been key. Is it's like I just need to do what I'm supposed to do because Jesus has commanded it of me. And every time I've done that, I've seen why. Every time I have submitted to the truth of scripture, I've been like, oh,
yeah,
okay, Jesus, like I see, I get it. And it takes time. And there are things that right now I don't know. I'm in a season right now where I genuinely am like, what are you doing? Like, I thought this was what was for me.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be good. I thought this was going to be life-giving.
Mm-hmm.
And it even lined up with what I thought you wanted for me, Jesus. And he has been like, nope, wait.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, why? But that's okay. Because I have a track record of when I obey and submit without understanding, he provides understanding through the way that he works in my life. And so for me, like the wait, what moment is that, which is obey, and then you will understand at some point. And it might be a while. It might be
eternity.
Right. It might be not on this side of heaven, but all of the evidence I have is that it will be true, that I will come to understand it. And I think oftentimes God's gracious enough to let us in on it on this side of heaven. But yeah, for me, like that is like you just need to be obedient. And the last thing I'll say, before I let you kind of have a final thought, was you were talking about going to the gym, and this is somewhat related, but Paul talks about in Timothy how training is good and physical health is good. But he says this, he says, rather train yourself for godliness, for while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. 1 Timothy 4:7.
Yeah.
And like, there are things that are good to do in life that are not church related.
Right.
Exercise, diet, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, that is important. And in fact, I think it's biblical to be healthy. But if you use that as a reason to not go to church on Sunday, if you use those things as reasons to not be in community, not have spiritual friendships, not be known by others, and if you are saying, well, because I can pray by myself and I can go to Jesus when I want and my Christian faith is my own, I would just say, get to know Jesus a little bit more because he has something to say about that. And yeah, that's for me been the big thing. But yeah, last thoughts.
I think to your point on obedience, like obedience brings blessing. Obedience brings blessing every single time. And that's something that I've been reminded about recently as I'm figuring out these other pieces of my life. How do I incorporate Jesus? And like, how do I bring my work into obedience with the Lord? How do I bring my free time into obedience with the Lord? How do I bring my relationships into obedience with the Lord and allow him to bless those things? And to your point, there are times and more often than not recently, and I blame my busyness, but that's just an excuse of saying, of not getting in the word, of not going to church, of not, doing the things that I know that are good for me. And, you gave the analogy of being a parent, and the analogy that popped in my mind was, of course, strength training. Of when you're first starting out going to the gym, like this was the first week back in the gym, like consistently in a while. I did legs on Monday. My legs were sore all week. This is the first day, and it's Saturday, that my legs were not sore. But you have, when you're doing strength training, like it's going to suck. And you're not going to want to go back the next day And it can be the same thing spiritually of like, you go in spiritually and you read, or you go to church, and maybe you have a bad experience, or you whatever. You don't want to go back, but the Lord, and same thing with training, he's like being consistent with it and being obedient with it and doing it when you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And really, like you said, taking it seriously, taking your faith and taking your spirituality seriously is the most important thing you can do to grow that thing.
Yeah. And it is going to be painful.
Yeah.
But it is still worth it.
It is.
And it's going to be painful, not because Jesus is bad.
Right.
It's going to be painful not because, oh, this is hard and it's not good. The pain is a reflection of where you've been living apart from Jesus.
Yep.
And the tension of getting back to a relationship with him is what hurts.
Yep.
It's, as iron sharpens iron, as one brother sharpens another, whatever that verse says. That's like, have you ever sharpened a sword before? Like, you stick it in fire.
Yeah.
You stick it in fire, and then you take a hammer and you smash it. Like, that's a painful process. But you wouldn't say, oh, well, then no one needs swords because that's got to be bad. That's got to be painful. It's like, no, the goal is to be sharp. The goal is to be aligned with Jesus. When you have been apart for so long and the process of getting connected and reconnected is painful, that's not a reflection of who Jesus is. That's a reflection of what you have been apart from him. Yeah. So you're experiencing the consequences of that. And it's not necessarily punishment of sin, but just when you're living for yourself and you choose to live for Jesus, you have to sacrifice yourself. And sacrificing is painful, but it is for the greater good. In the same way of like, if you want those tree trunk legs and you want to be crushing it at the gym, it's going to be painful.
The pain is good.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't feel good, doesn't look good, like all those things. But like at the end, it's going to produce the yields that you want it to spiritually.
Yeah. And
whenever you face pain, whenever you face adversity in the things that even in the things that are good for you. I remember I was watching a show the other day and it was similar type thing, but they're talking about scales. Like whenever you're experiencing that pain and you don't think you can go any further, imagine your pain on one side and the reward of the thing on the other side. Which one's going to weigh? Which one is going to outweigh the other? And you get to be the decision. Like you get to determine that. If you're going to let your pain win, then the reward's you met your reward. If you're willing to let the pain, there be more pain, then there's going to be more reward at the end.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying. That's, I think, again, the wait, what moment was like, how do I do that? How do I invite that into other aspects of my life and bring all those other things into obedience, even though it's painful right now? And because I want to be just infatuated with the Lord.
Yeah. And
I want to be just so connected to him and so obedient that because he promises such a good life for us, and he promises us so many good things, and I want that relationship to be better because I know I've had times in my life where that relationship is amazing and it's just like, oh yes, like I can't wait. I'm not in that place right now, and so I'm going through the pains of like getting back to that place, and that's the hard part, right?
Yeah, and I would challenge and invite anybody to find me someone who has genuinely pursued Jesus, experience the pain of what that purification and sanctification process is like, and who's come out and said, not worth it.
No,
there is no one who's saying not worth it, because it's the ultimate truth, and it's the ultimate, he's the ultimate prize, and it's worth it. So man, I so appreciate you coming to sit down
thanks for having me
and having this conversation. And I'm sure you'll be back more. For those of you who are watching, you may be seeing my dog who's walking around causing all sorts of troubles. But she's a part of the fam. So anyway, Karson, I love you, man. I appreciate everything, your wisdom. And yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for just chatting.
Absolutely.